solve large, intractable problems.
It's a new venture altogether.
Your brain is a wild horse there.
Because remember, writing is not a team sport.
You are not selling horse carriages when there are cars.
I want to be known only as the trusted advisor.
More like a tourist.
Play to Potential podcast.
Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge for a lot of extremely successful people is time is a hugely short commodity, right? And so therefore they start by giving money. And, it gives you some joy. So you can give a little bit of money. But my biggest learning is beyond a point, money is not going to make a difference. And after a point, you'll start getting frustrated that, you're giving money, but kuch ho nahi raha. It's only when you actually start getting involved with your time that you actually start seeing the nuances involved, the difficulties involved, the challenges involved. And you start enjoying your giving.
Welcome to the 63rd conversation at the Play to Potential podcast. I'm your host Deepak Jayaraman, and I work with leaders as an executive coach, sounding board, or as a transition advisor as they navigate the journeys. The two questions I try and help leaders with are where to go and how to grow. I find that these two questions are quite parallel to the two questions businesses need to ask in the context of their strategy, where to play and how to win. In this podcast series, we feature conversations from leaders from different walks of life on three broad themes: leadership, transitions, and careers. My guest this time is Venkat Krishnan. Venkat is the founder and director at GiveIndia Foundation, an organization that was born on the 28th of April 2000, out of the belief that equal opportunity is the cornerstone of civilization, and that all human beings must have the same opportunity to succeed in life, irrespective of the circumstances they are born into. However, you would appreciate that that's far from where things are today. GiveIndia's vision is to change this inequality by bringing together the people who want to give and the organizations on the ground that work to make a difference. This was possibly the longest conversation I've had at the podcast till date. It went on for about a couple of hours. If you want to get to a specific topic, you can go to the nuggets. If you want to listen to the entire conversation, then just to give you a sense of how this is structured, the first hour of the conversation or so was about Venkat's journey, his childhood, his formative experiences, his education in IIMA, and some of the early career choices he made before he set up GiveIndia 2 decades back. And the second half of the conversation revolves around some of the themes around giving and his views on them. Do you give time or money? How much to give? And running giving like a marathon and not as a sprint, and so on. To me personally, it was a transformative conversation and got me thinking on several dimensions, and I hope you will find it purposeful too. But before we go to the conversation with Venkat, just a quick note on the next podcast. I had an opportunity to speak with Marshall Goldsmith, considered one of the greatest coaches ever. And it was like a private tennis lesson with Roger Federer or a cricketing masterclass with Sachin Tendulkar. During the conversation, Marshall asked me several uncomfortable questions and got me to reflect on several things and several behaviors that I've been blind to. It was much more like a coaching session and much less like a podcast conversation. It's got me thinking about several questions that I hadn't paid attention to earlier. Just as a heads up, I'll be publishing that in a couple of weeks' time. But now, let's dive into my conversation with Venkat Krishnan. Venkat, thank you so much for making the time for the Play to Potential podcast. Excited to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
A good place to start, Venkat, is maybe trying to get a sense of what your plate looks like, what your pie chart of time looks like. Could you tell us a little bit about maybe the portfolio of the various things you do and a little bit of the why behind the what before we rewind the clock?
Sure. It's very straightforward now, quite simplified. There's just two areas that I spend a lot of my time on. One is promoting giving, and the other is promoting volunteering. Mm-hmm. So giving of money and volunteering of time. Mm-hmm. And so 100% of my time is now spent across just these two initiatives. There are 2 or 3 specific initiatives that I spend a lot of time on. On the giving side right now, a lot of my time goes onto an initiative called Living My Promise, which is about getting middle class Indians and upper middle class Indians to commit to 50% of their wealth to a cause of their choice over their lifetime or in their will. Another piece that I spend a lot of time is around volunteering, which is we are now trying to incubate a series of volunteering initiatives across the country with an aspiration of engaging at least 2 or 3 million Indians as volunteers in the next 3 or 4 years. That's the second one. And then, of course, there's a third thing which straddles both of these, which is, of course, Dan Utsav, which is India's festival of giving, celebrated every year from 2nd to 8th of October. And so I work along with 200 or 300 other volunteers to try to evangelize it and get more and more people to engage.
And that's a combination of time and money, or is it only?
Absolutely. That's a combination of time, money, and material.
Okay.
You can give in kind as well.
Understood. I'd love to go a little deeper on each of these, Venkat, in terms of time and money and material. But I find it helpful to understand people's early years. If I were to ask you, could you talk a little bit about your maybe the first 15, 20 years? Specifically, you talk about going to an airport school, which I understand was a key part of your growing up. Could you tell us a little bit about how your childhood shaped who you are as a person today?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is, of course, winning the ovarian lottery, right? Being born in the right house. So very, very lucky to have been born in a middle-class family. A dad who is extremely, the classic tinkering kind of a person who spends a lot of his time tinkering with devices, etc. He's a mechanical engineer. And so while the country is building Atal tinkering labs, etc., our home was an Atal tinkering lab throughout my childhood. So I had a huge opportunity to learn a lot because of that. A mother who was extremely, extremely caring and loving. And so, sometimes people like me don't even understand a lot of the mental health issues other people face, simply because we've never faced, or I have at least never faced, any trauma incidents in my childhood. And, I think I can only be deeply grateful to my parents for that. But I also recognize that that's a very, very rare case of being extremely lucky to have had that. Plus, being born the last of 3 siblings. So, all the benefits of pampering, all the benefits of learning from the mistakes of the elder 2 siblings. So fabulous childhood. We traveled only within Bombay. We didn't go out of Bombay. My dad shifted jobs within the city. But, had an opportunity to go to 4 or 5 different schools through my childhood. But the good thing about it was all these schools, barring one, were schools that were focused on all socioeconomic strata. So the first school we went to was run by Godrej for all its employees. So you went there whether you were a worker's child or you were a manager's child or a vice president's child. And therefore, we always had a mixture of children of different socioeconomic strata there. And pretty much the later schools as well, especially at High School, which was the key formative years from the age of 10 to about 17, 18, when I finished my 10th standard. I spent in that school where I got a lot of opportunity to see how much impact, where you're born has on your life. So I had friends who lived in slums, had friends who had, 2 and 3 BHK flats in Bombay, which is like you have to be really rich to have that. And so that was definitely one of the most important shaping factors. But yeah, I would summarize the childhood as extremely lucky, fabulous childhood, had a lot of fun, played a lot, read a lot, got to learn a lot. And so I think built a really solid base. Sometimes when I look back and I look at what kind of base I got, I actually think I've hugely underachieved to the potential that the base created for people like me.
Actually, that begs the philosophical question on what achieving the potential means, right? I think I guess that's a discussion maybe we can have. Yes. But maybe if I could keep that in the parking lot for now. But I'm curious about your early choices, Venkat, BCom versus BSc, and then you went to IIMA subsequently. Could you tell us a little bit about how you thought about early choices?
I think early in around ninth standard or something, I had a elder cousin who used to work with a stockbroker, and I got good exposure to the financial markets at a very early age. I was also always very good with numbers, and so I was quite excited about finance as a profession, stuff like that. And so there was a back of the mind thought that maybe I want to become a chartered accountant, something like that. So I was pretty much thinking that I would love to go ahead and study commerce when I was in school. Unfortunately, I did extremely well in my 10th standard board exams.
Wow.
And so
merit
list and all of that kind of stuff happened, and kind of got pushed into science. Parental, social pressure, all of that kind of stuff. And, in hindsight, now I have absolutely no regrets about that. I think it was a great choice to go into science. I keep telling a lot of young people that I meet these days that if you have really got a choice, either go into the pure sciences or go into the pure liberal arts. Commerce, engineering, these are all applied professions. You don't actually build knowledge, you use knowledge. MBA as well. MBA is the worst of all of them, right? You just use knowledge rather than building knowledge. I think building knowledge adds a lot more value to society than applying knowledge does. Not to discount the value of applying knowledge. I think it's far easier to apply knowledge than to create it. It's far easier to vaccinate 1 billion people than to invent the vaccine.
Interesting. In terms of moving the society forward.
Correct.
Understood. Okay.
So that's how I decided to get into science. God decided for me to get into science. But then I became very clear as I started studying that I love mathematics, of course, as a subject. And I was very clear that that's what I wanted to study. And so, 12th again, unfortunately, I did very well. Even though I didn't even study, I flunked all my prelims. I got single-digit marks out of 100 in all our prelim subjects, which scared me enough to study for like a month before the board exams, so that I should fail or I should at least get a first class. Again, unfortunately, merit list, did very well, all of that stuff. But I think by this time I had matured a lot, grown a lot, and I was able to stand my ground much, much more firmly this time around. So,
and why do you say unfortunately? I'm curious about why you say that.
So I think in those times, we're now talking of 1988, which is about 32 years ago. It wasn't too easy to oppose social pressure, right? And in those days, if you're not becoming a doctor or an engineer, you were a waste in life, right? So 12th especially was the time where I don't remember, with one or two friends as an exception, a friend who introduced me to a lot of amazing literature, for example. There was nobody else in the ecosystem who supported my choice to go ahead and study science and not going for engineering. It was very difficult. So family, relatives, everybody pushing for me to go into engineering. And, I'm quite proud of myself. In fact, if you ask me now, that at that age, I had that courage to stand by my conviction and tell people, you do what you want to, I'm not going to study engineering. Not because I didn't like it. Like I said, I grew up in a tinkering lab family. And so I was pretty good at all of that stuff. And even today, pretty much, any device gets broken and all of that stuff, I'm very comfortable opening things up, repairing them myself, stuff like that. If I want to. But I was clear that that's not what I wanted to do with my life. By that time, my thoughts were already getting shaped around what I wanted to do with my life. And that was a lot about, how do you reduce inequality in society? Very, very early in life. So I read Communist Manifesto, thanks to that one friend of mine, Jatin Wagle, who introduced me to a lot of that stuff. And I'm very strongly of the view that the inequality in society, which I also experienced in school myself, is something we need to do something about. And I was very clear that that's something I want to work on in my life at some point of time. So, engineering didn't seem to be the right way to go at that stage. So I chose to sign up for a BSc in mathematics. And then in the second year of my undergrad, we had a phenomenally good stats professor, Professor Sathe, who actually introduced me to a bunch of very, very interesting books on statistics, foreign author textbooks, and just reading them, Theory of Epidemics by somebody called N.T.J. Bailey, and another one called Sampling Techniques by William Cochrane. Two fabulous books that just opened my eyes up to what the potential of working with numbers has in terms of impacting society, kind of, so to say. So I decided to switch to stats at the end of my second year. So I graduated in statistics. I also hedged, having taken that risk of not going for engineering. So along with my BSc, I also studied and finished the cost accounting exams. Yeah.
Got it. And the decision to write CAT
CAT was insurance, right? CAT was basically insurance. And so that's again a decision that, so I got through all the IIMs, but I, of course, went overboard. So one of my biggest strengths, if you ask me in life, is contingency planning, right? So I always plan for the worst. I may or may not hope for the best, but I do plan for the worst. So I not only wrote CAT, I also wrote the CWT, which is the Bombay MBA entrance exams. I wrote the TIS entrance exam, XLRI entrance exam, whole bunch of them, just to be safe. And in those days, of course, the entrance fees were not very high. CAT was $500, something like that. So got through all of them, ISI Calcutta as well, which my professor had egged me to try. And then went to, IIM results came, IIM Ahmedabad got through, went in, didn't hear back from ISI Calcutta by that time. So went and joined IIM Ahmedabad, got started there.
But out of curiosity, Venkat, just going back to a couple of things, right? One is your desire to impact the society and spend time doing that kind of work, coupled with your point about science versus application. Do you consider a course around social work or something on those fronts? Why an MBA in that context, given what
two reasons. One, like I said, insurance, right? I needed to make sure that I was going to be financially reasonably well off. We were not a very affluent family. We weren't poor, but we weren't very affluent. And so I think somewhere the need to earn well enough for myself, but more than for myself, for my family, for my parents, was definitely a consideration that was there in the back of the mind. So that, and second is, I'm not sure I believe then or even now believe that social work is the way to change the world necessarily. I think there are multiple ways to change the world. So social work is never in the consideration set also.
Understood. I think picking up in IIMA, I'm curious about one of the quotes that I picked up as I was doing the research, Venkat, in one of the LEM courses in IIMA on the course on entrepreneurship. You use the phrase, I see myself as an instrument or tool that's available to society, and my choices should be guided by maximizing the returns that I'll give to the society. Say more about this. Where does it come from? Because when I go back to campus days, I can't remember anybody around me having that framing in terms of how they thought about themselves. So if you could talk a little bit about where that self-awareness came from.
Right. No, couple of things. First is, like I said, pretty much even in college, did a lot of work in the extracurricular space while I was in undergrad college and got a chance to work with. So starting from in fact, I would go back to even school, Airport High School, where, we had lot of underprivileged, not so privileged kids coming there to the same school. And I used to spend a lot of time helping some of them, prepare for exams, learn concepts that they wouldn't get in class, etc. So teaching friends, tutoring them for free, stuff like that. I even tutored some kids for money in French later on and stuff like that. But I kind of felt that some of us are just outrageously lucky, right? Like I told you in the beginning. So there's always been this feeling that I don't really believe that I've done anything great. It's just where I was born that has made a huge difference. And anything we can do to, give other people a leg up so that they can get at least somewhere close. I mean, you can't possibly completely equate it. You can't make the same base. Only government can probably do that. But can we at least help some people get a base so that they have a fair chance at least to compete in the world and stuff like that. So that thought was already there in the mind, even when I went to IIM. One of the thoughts definitely in the back of the mind was entrepreneurship. I've been very strongly entrepreneurial from college days, school days, etc. And therefore, the idea of doing stuff, maybe building a business that will help people. All of that stuff was also there at the back of the mind. And I think 2-3 things that happened. A couple of very close friends on campus. So, in the dorms, there are just like on the floor, 10 people. So 2 very good friends. One, Sridhar Rajgopalan, with whom I then went on to set up and still probably one of my closest friends today. Sridhar and I used to spend a lot of time together on campus, just talking about various things, discussing. We've gone on 25-30 kilometer walks in the night, all the way from IIMA Ahmedabad to the railway station and back, walking. One of those was with Sridhar carrying his laundry clothes in his hand because we'd actually gone to pick up his clothes. We decided to continue walking and went all the way and came back. And we would talk about a lot of things. We would talk about politics. We would talk about what is the right thing to do in a country like India. How do you, solve these issues of poverty? How do you solve these inefficiencies on the system? Stuff like that. So we used to keep talking about a lot of these things. And I think that had a significant, of course, influence even that point of time in shaping the mind further. The other was Sunil Khernar, again a batchmate and dorm mate. And Sunil comes from an agricultural family. So he grew up in a farmer's house. He's been a farmer throughout his childhood. And so he was doing the SPA program at IIMA. But one of the most amazingly intelligent guys I've come across, deeply introverted, so you don't actually realize, but so much depth, it was extraordinary. And the spirit of service of wanting to do something for farmers that he had in his heart, I think that must have also had a rub-off effect. So it was just the sangat, right? I mean, you get shaped by the company you keep. So there was a huge influence of the company as well on the thought processes. So, yeah, and I guess once you realize that everything you have is because of the world has given it to you, and not because, you got some false notion that I'm this wonderful rock star who's worked very hard to create everything I've got in my life, then it kind of almost as a corollary follows that you then ought to pay it forward, right? And so I have pretty much from very early in life, I think the articulation in that Lem reflection note was very sharp, but otherwise I'd always kind of been in that direction of thought that, I have everything I need. I don't really need anything else. What's the, use of myself? I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe life has a purpose. Even spiritually and philosophically, quite people find it paradoxical that I actually think Thanos is a very interesting character. Right? If at a click of a thumb you can get half the world to not exist, it actually helps the world in various ways and stuff like that. So, so given that there is no predefined purpose of life, we have to construct our own purposes, right? Or you have to go and walk off a cliff and die. There's no purpose in life. Why exist? If you have to create your own purpose in life, in my case, I think I was very clear that I had everything I needed. I didn't really need anything else. And therefore, the best use of my life is to be of use to others. In that sense, I have seen then and I continue to see myself primarily as a resource that is available to help improve the situation for society as it exists to the extent possible. And therefore, my decisions are always guided by that. So every fork that I've come across, the key criterion for decision making is which of these paths helps me create more change or create more impact, social good. And that's been kind of driving all the decisions. The second one that I'm very, very clear about is that, each of us needs to be net positive contributors into the system. So I'm acutely aware that, and we consume from the system in various ways. So the more obvious ones are the physical resources that we consume, right? And like the environmental impact of our life and stuff like that. So those are things I'm very, very clear about. So I have a commitment to make sure that I plant enough trees to offset at least 1.5x of my carbon footprint throughout my life. And maybe I will even do 5x of it so that it offsets all my family's carbon footprint or something like that. But also very, very clear that at no point do I want to be a parasite on society. So at one point of time, after a certain age, if I'm not being able to be productive, I would really love it if I could just go and euthanize myself. To me, that would be the ideal option. Never be a burden on society. Be of value or don't exist. So that is the second and very strong.
And when you say productive, how do you think?
The first criterion, right? Adding value to society, contributing back.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. Coming back to Venkat, one of the initiatives he's driving is called Living My Promise, where people who've been blessed with the ovarian lottery and have done well give away 50% of their wealth. One of the couples participating in this is Ramesh Mangaleshwaran, a senior partner at McKinsey, and Meenakshi Ramesh, trustee at Urvani Foundation, two batchmates of his from IIMA Ahmedabad. Here's Meenakshi speaking about why they as a couple chose to participate in this.
So there came a time when Ramesh and I began to realize that it was not really a choice of sharing this good fortune that we had with others. It was really an obligation, a responsibility, because we had received so much more than we had expected or than we think we deserved. We had had the good fortune of being in families that valued good education. We got great opportunities to go out and make a living. So we think that being in Living My Promise is a wonderful way to achieve this obligation to share with those that didn't get a piece of this good fortune. The group is like an honor code. You want to do the best you can. You want to meet with like-minded individuals, understand their experiences, learn from their maybe mistakes, what didn't go right. And the most important thing for Ramesh and I is that we want to share and we want to live the promise of giving away more than half of our personal wealth within our lifetime and share this joy as much as possible. Thank you.
You can know more about this initiative at livingmypromise.org. Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. And the point you made about the fact that we consume, that we take, I mean, carbon footprint is probably one of the more obvious ones, but any pieces that people normally miss when you think about how we...
So there's one that most of us miss, and the one that I know I am never going to be able to offset, at least in this life. I don't believe in future lives either, but I don't have an answer to that problem. Emotional footprint.
Say more.
So kind of like the carbon footprint, right? So I think you leave in your interactions with people, you leave them feeling better or feeling worse. So when you leave people feeling better, you have an emotional positive, what Stephen Covey calls emotional bank account balance. And this idea first occurred to me when I read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I am a ridiculously low EQ guy. Everything, even emotions, I actually calculate, think about, etc. And I know that I'm going to have hurt far more people in my life than I would have brought joy to, emotionally speaking. I mean, and I'm discounting, of course, that I might have helped somebody get food and therefore they are able to have a happy family and there is an emotional payoff of all of that and something like that. I'm discounting that. I'm just looking at more from a personal ecosystem point of view, a bunch of, friends, relatives, family, other people, etc. And if I look at their emotional expectations from me, I'm going to leave most people shortchanged on that in my life. And, it hurts that's going to happen. But I do keep going back to it periodically. It's difficult to change yourself as you get older, but I've tried and I've made some changes. But, I'm wired the way I am. And my one regret when I finally die is going to be that I will have left a negative and emotional footprint on the earth.
It's a great framing. Emotional bank balance, I've heard. Credit in the bank, I've heard. But footprint...
Extending the same idea, right? Extending the same bank balance idea.
But picking up on your journey, Venkat, placements, you went to the media industry. Could you talk, given your desire to drive change, could you talk a little bit about your early career choices to go to Times of India and Sony?
Right. So actually, Sridhar and I wanted to do our summer training in Khadi. So, one of the things we were both exploring at that time is should we, write the IAS as a way to, be of service to society kind of a thing. And so the idea came that, maybe we should go and work with an IAS officer and that will give us a lot of insight, etc. We reached out to one of our professors, Professor Anil Gupta, and he was kind enough to actually reach out to the CEO of Khadi Village Industries Commission. They came to campus and offered a summer training internship. Unfortunately, the summer training rules was that if you sat in an interview and got accepted, then you became disqualified. So I think Sridhar had sat at the NIT interview. Sridhar is a tech geek, he loves coding, stuff like that. And he got selected, so he couldn't. But I was lucky enough. So another instance where Sridhar did the hard work, but I got the payoff. So I got to do my summer internship with Khadi and Village Industries Commission.
Okay.
Phenomenal experience. And I think with the immaturity of youth, I kind of used that experience to take a call not to do the IAS. In hindsight, not sure. I think IAS is a great route if you want to bring about social change. Actually, not such a bad idea at all. But what can you do?
And your choice to join Times of India?
So on camp, So then, after graduation, I was very clear there were just one or two opportunities. So I applied only to 3 companies on campus. One was FSL. HCL was just starting something called Frontline Solutions Limited, where they were actually looking for entrepreneurs. So they said that we will get you to set up a HCL store in your area as an entrepreneur. We give you some seed capital and salary to get you started. But after a period, it's yours. You're a distributor on your own kind of a thing. So that was very, very exciting because of my deep entrepreneurial bias. The second, of course, was Times of India. And that came, of course, from the idea that media has a chance to create change, look at that from an opportunity point of view. And the third was a company called IIMA Syntex in Ahmedabad. That was very exciting because they were actually offering a financial controller role for fresher. Right?
Wow.
They weren't looking for freshers, they were looking for people with 2 or 3 years experience, stuff like that. But thought I'd apply. So as it turned out, FSL was a day 5 company, Times of India was day 6, and FSL was day 9. So it was a happy situation to be in, watching everybody else go through all the stress from day 1 to day 5, not having a single interview to do and stuff like that. I think I did have one SBI Capital or Prime Securities, some such thing on day 2 that I'd applied for, but I was very clear I didn't, so I went without a tie and all of that stuff. Got a lot of people upset for doing that. Saying कि तुमको job नहीं चाहिए, ठीक है, but at least don't ruin the campus reputation for employers. So, but FSL, I was very keen on. They did give me an offer, but they gave me an offer to set it up in Nagpur or some other place. I didn't want to do that. I said, give me Bombay. They said, you must be joking. We won't give Bombay as a territory to even a 30-year-old with 10 years experience. No way we can give you Bombay. So then I passed on that. And the next day was the Times of India thing. So that was a fairly easy thing to get through. I think very few people had applied because salary was high. And, 3 of us, 6 or 7 people had applied. 3 of us got offers from them. And IIMA, once I got Times of India, I was about to opt out of placement and accept it. And then the owner of the company called me and asked me to come over and meet them because their office is headquartered in Ahmedabad. So I had a chance to go and meet him, Chintan Parekh and Nitin Parekh, who was the director, financial director of the group. And so I had a good conversation with them, and they actually said, are you open to becoming our CFO? I said, look, I'm 23 years old.
Wow.
They said, we are happy to take the bet with you. We really like you. So that was a very interesting thing because money-wise, that was paying like more than double of what the Times of India offer was. And, so then I was very keen. But by that time, my brother had gone abroad to study. My sister had just got married. So in 1991, my parents moved from a family with 3 kids to being complete empty nesters, right? And I was very keen to go back home and be with them for a few years at least. So then I spoke to them about that. And then they said, hey, no problem. We have Anagram Finance in Bombay. You can work out of that office, travel to Ahmedabad when you need. It was ridiculous, the kind of things they were doing to try and make it work. And but at the back of the mind, there was this whole issue that this is a great opportunity to learn and grow. but where is the social impact, the purpose and all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm not completely anal about it. I have that ability to defer, satisfaction for a while. Sometimes, you take a path which helps you build your own capacity so that you can have much greater impact later on. It wasn't that I was ruling it out, but I was struggling a lot with that. And then I had a conversation with my dad, and he said, look, don't worry about money. We'll somehow make it work. You pick what your heart says. And so that's how I picked time.
Got it. And Sony?
So I was having a great run at times. I had a fabulous boss I worked with, Arun Arora. Beauty was the amount of space he gave. I've not come across any other boss in my life. I haven't had any other bosses, just one other boss after that. But I've never seen people give young people the kind of space he gave. So although I had a small JD to work in one function, I actually got to work across at least 8 or 10 different functions in the company, ranging from branding, editorial management, to technology, to, operations and production and stuff like that. So very, very diverse exposure in a 2.5 year time span, and got to work on even important strategic issues. So I was like playing a minion's role, but a role when we had a union strike on the labor issues. I got to work on launching remote editions, the first remote editions ever launched in India. I got to work on, a whole bunch of things on convincing the owners to dramatically increase salaries that we pay to journalists. A whole bunch of things that you couldn't even imagine a 24-year-old getting the opportunity to work on those kind of stuff. So it was a fabulous journey. And then my boss, Arun Arora, decided to quit and join Sony. And of course, he hadn't told me yet. So he, of course, went and met Ashok Jain, was then the chairman of Bennett Coleman, and told him. And Ashok ji, of course, my boss was a Times veteran. He'd been with them for more than 25 years then. And they said, our biggest worry is if you have to go, so please don't take anybody else with you, because half the company will go with you. And so they said, maximum you can take one person. And so he asked for permission to take me.
Wow.
And so I was a young guy at that time, 25 years old. So they said, "Theek hai yaar, le jao."
And at the risk of sounding immodest, Venkat, why do you think he might have picked you?
I don't know. You have to ask him. Maybe he liked me, that's all. I was also very good at typing letters for him. Maybe that. I don't know. But he came back from the room, and then he called me in and he said, "Venkat, I'm quitting." I said, "Oh my God, that's terrible." He said, "And you're coming with me." I said, "What the hell is that?" But yeah, I mean, I loved working with him. And the good thing about the Sony thing was, number one, it was paying 3 times what the Times of India salary was. Times of India salary was much lower. And what Sony was offering me was on par with what my batchmates in McKinsey were making at that time. It was a really, really high salary. And part of a startup, setting up a channel from scratch. That seemed like a very, very exciting opportunity. And we were financially not doing well at that point of time. We were at, I think 94, 95 was the worst time in our life, financially speaking, as a family. So the money made a difference. So I said, "Okay, chalo, karte, start experience milega." I was very clear that this is that case of deferring, satisfaction. So I was very clear that Sony was not going to do social impact. You're going to make soaps, how do serials and soaps going to transform society? But went with the flow, took it up.
Got it. And Eklavya, Venkat, I'm curious about
that happened ridiculously quickly. So I joined Sony in June 95, and in August 95 went to my boss and said, "I want to quit and go and set up a school." Right? And so it was completely unplanned. While I was in Times of India, I used to teach. That bug about wanting to do something more, etc. So I used to go to this place called Sumaya Institute of Management and take 3 lectures every weekend, 3 hours each. So 3 hours on Saturday, 6 hours on Sunday, teaching a course on research and communication methodology. Thoroughly enjoyed doing that. And so the idea that one can have a huge impact on young people through education kind of very clear. So Sunil Honda, who's an alumnus and was teaching a course, the LEM course at IIMA, was planning to set up a school. So one fine day he sent a mail to, mail to nahi tha, I think email didn't exist in those days. He sent a physical note, 20-page hard copy note to a bunch of us saying, I'm planning to set up a school. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Give me your thoughts, etc. And Sridhar, who used to work in IBM at that point of time, and I met, in one of those hotels in Bandra where all the IBM guys used to stay on one of his trips to Bombay. And Sridhar said, Yaar, ye jaake, we should do something about this. I said, Chalo. So we went August, one of the weekends, to Ahmedabad. And met Sunil Honda and said, we are happy to volunteer our weekends for you. And he said, why don't you quit and join me? I'll pay you 1/3 your current salary, which was back to my Times of India salary level. But, we'll get to build a school, great, we'll do this, etc. I don't know, both of us sat back and discussed it for a couple of hours and decided, chalo, karte hain.
Wow.
We came back and it took us a lot of time to get released from our companies because we were in the middle of launching a television channel. Back there, Sridhar was in the middle of launching a product called OS2, a new operating system that IBM was about to release. So it took us a while. Sridhar joined on 1st of January 96, and I joined on 15th of January.
And given what you spoke about, the comp levels and the family context, it must have been was it a
yes
tough
and no. So I'll tell you what gave the comp level comfort was very simple. The salary at Sony was ridiculously high, right? In 3 months, I'd finished paying off all our loans. So I finished paying off my student loans. I finished paying off my brother's student loans. Actually, he had paid more than half of his student loan. He just finishing his master's at that point of time, and he was working, a few hours, flipping burgers, stuff like that, etc. And so a little bit of that, and a few other loans that we had. So in 3-4 months, I was able to pay it off. Actually, not so bad.
Got it. And maybe just curious about 4 years at Eklavya, and you were running it for about 2.5 years, and then you decided to do something else. Could you talk a little bit about those 4 years and also your choice to move on to do something else? How did that come about?
So a couple of things. One is, of course, we spent 1.5 years researching education. We spent a lot of time understanding what is a good school, and that's hats off and credit to Sunil Honda for the kind of first principles approach he takes to everything he does. So that's been a big learning that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And the other thing about him is extent to which he's well organized. Right? So you can have a conversation with him today, and if there is an action that he has to do 3 months down the line, he won't forget it.
Wow.
There, something called a Diviso Flex that he used to maintain. I don't know whether he's moved it to digital devices now, but I use Google Calendar like crazy now. Right? So even if I have to remember to buy, a coconut tomorrow morning, it's on, at 6:30 in the morning, Google Calendar will remind me.
Understood.
That's something I learned from him.
What is the mechanism you mentioned? I didn't quite catch the term.
Google Calendar.
No, that he used to use?
He used something called a Diviso Flex. A Diviso Flex is basically a file with separators in it.
Okay.
So he used to use separators for different entities he used to work with, right? So his business, corrugated packaging was one entity. So that was a separate section. Eklavya was a separate section. A bunch of other stuff that he was involved with.
Understood.
He used to have separate section. Within a section, he had a separate page for each person. So there was a page for me, there was a page for Sridhar, there was a page for everybody he worked with.
I'm curious, this notion of critical but not urgent. I have huge respect for people who can follow through on those pieces, especially in today's times.
Yes.
So sorry, back to you. You were talking about...
So basically we had a phenomenal year just learning what it takes to run a good school, what a good school means, even stuff like that. And then we set up and we were running the school. It was a great experience. A bunch of things, one, of course, views on how it should be run and stuff like that. End of the day, Sunil Honda was the owner, and so, one has to make way for that. So that was definitely one of the factors. But the other factor, of course, that was playing in at least our minds was, how is this going to scale? how it's going to create impact on a much larger scale in society. Right? So you can build islands of excellence like the IIMs and, those schools and stuff like that. And it's not to discount the value that those add to society. But how do you scale something like this to create impact on a much larger number of people's lives was an annoying question in our own mind. So we kind of moved out at different points of time depending on, what was right for each of us. Sudhir was 1 year junior to us, was also at Eklavya. So Sudhir moved out first, then I moved out, then Sridhar moved out. And we actually, once all of us had moved out, we got back together and started a company called Educational Initiatives. And
the other piece I'm curious about, Venkat, is you also call this your closest brush with failure. The Ekalavya school
experience, one of the closest brushes with failure. And now I think today I have far more daily brushes with failure than I did when I was young. But we were starting the school. We'd done a really lot of good work preparing up for it and building up to it, etc. When in hindsight, when I go back and think of those days, I can't imagine anybody else having prepared as much to build a good school as we had. It was a ridiculous amount of investment of time and energy and resources to set up a good school. So we were kind of almost arrogantly confident. This is like an ultimate school that we're going to build, right? And in those days, you didn't have that many schools also. So getting admission used to be like a huge challenge for parents.
And this was in Ahmedabad, the school?
Ahmedabad, yeah. I remember us thinking, we wanted to start with 3 classes. So 20, 20 and 24, so 64 kids is what we wanted. And we were speculating a week before we started admissions, that how many people will apply. If we get 3,000 people, how will you shortlist? How will you select? We'd actually reached out to KPMG and got them on board to conduct a random draw of lots for selection of admissions. How will that random draw of lots be done? All of that kind of stuff. And so I'm not sure of the exact date. I think it was the 27th of March or something like that, 97, when we opened out for admissions. And we were expecting, so we're going to start at 9 o'clock, and we thought the queue will start building up from 7:30. And so, at 9:15, Sunilanda actually came with a handy cam to try and record the queues and all of that. And that whole day, we got 2 inquiries.
Wow.
Right? And we were expecting 1,500 plus, something like that. So, massive shock for us that only 2 people were interested in even listening, and neither of them even decided to take admission. So we tried to extend by a couple of more days, went through the rut, and we got 13 admissions finally with a little bit of effort. And I remember we were sitting on the terrace of Core House, which is where the office used to be, and late at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock, and all dejected and wondering what to do, etc. We then asked ourselves, "Karna kya hai? Should we even do this, or should we just wind up and go back to our lives, etc." And we said, "Tera hai, can we do something with these 13 kids? We want to give it a shot. Let's go ahead." And Sunilanda said, "Boss, if you guys are ready, I'm happy to back you." Money was coming from him, obviously, right? I'm not going to break even with 13 kids. So he said, "Chalo, karte hain." And so then for the next 2 months, the 3 or 4 teachers we had hired and the 3 of us, it's difficult to believe this, we went door to door, like shampoo salesmen, knocking on doors in Ahmedabad. At least 1,000 houses we would have gone. We knocked on people's homes and introduced ourselves and explained what we were trying to do and all of that kind of stuff. And, school of hard knocks, literally, but a brilliant lesson. We wound up with 34 kids when we started in June. We got 21 admissions through door-to-door sales.
Wow.
For something as important as education, people were willing to trust somebody who came and knocked on their door. That was amazing. Started with 34, we went to 51 by few months, and then we decided to not take more. The next year, we wanted 180 or so kids. We got more than 450 applications, and we wound up taking 200 plus. Thereafter, never looked back.
Wow. I think the other piece that really struck me when I was doing the research for this conversation, Venkat, was, when you decided to move on from Eklavya, you did something totally out of the box. You encashed your savings and buy a 12-city pass to the US. to take your parents there?
So that actually happened while I was still in Eklavya. That was
Okay.
That was a good 6-7 months before I moved out.
Okay.
Actually, no, good 18 months before I moved out. Yeah.
Okay.
So this was 98 April.
Okay.
So Sridhar, Sudhir and I, we were getting paid much less, but Ahmedabad is a ridiculously low-cost city in those days, and we all had very simple lifestyles, and we were working literally much more than 100 hours a week. I remember one of those days we saw an article that said that guys in Goldman Sachs are burning out because they have to work 80 to 100 hours a week. And so Sridhar, Sudhir and I, we sat and we calculated, and we were actually working much more than 100 hours a week regularly, right? And so we had nothing. Work was our life. We used to do nothing. So we'd start early in the morning, we'd sleep at 2 in the morning, start again the next morning. Sundays used to be lighter because we had chores, but we would work 12 hours even on Sundays, right? So we were all consumed about our work, and it wasn't work. It was sheer joy for us, right? Thoroughly enjoying what we were doing. So there was really no kharcha. So basically, and the good thing about Sunil Anda is he likes to take care of key people. So he was very worried about the fact that we were, how do we help us build our own savings and stuff like that. So he convinced a friend of his, an architect, to, identify 3 flats, and he said, okay, I'm going to actually book these flats for you guys, and you pay me back this much per month over a 7-year period. Wow. And the house is yours. Nice 2 BHK flat in a very posh apartment complex in Ahmedabad. So we were all beginning to save up for that. And so that pretty much in 95 itself or so, we started doing that. And then I think 98 is when, very interesting, I was in Bombay meeting my parents or something. I opened it. No, actually I was still in Ahmedabad. Reading the newspaper one morning, opened it, going through the classified. So we had put out an ad for admissions or for teachers, hiring teachers or something in the classified section. I was looking for my ad, and I saw this little ad saying, Bombay, New York, Bombay, Royal Jordanian, 23,000 round trip. I said, what? That's like ridiculously cheap, right? 23,000 for a round trip. And because I remember that in early 90s when my brother had gone to the US, he had paid 40,000 for a one-way trip. It was like ridiculously cheap. I did the math. I had saved about 80,000 rupees towards that house. I paid 80K worth of installments towards the house. That's like, plus I had some savings of my own and stuff like that. So I kind of said, "Bas lakh rupees to kharcha kar sakte hain. Why not just, my brother had started working. 91 he had left home. This was 98. 7 years my parents hadn't seen him. A very different world, right? In those days, you couldn't afford to fly back to India and stuff like that. You ask any parent in those generations, they didn't see their children for 10 years. It hit my mind that the easiest thing, I had already shortchanged my parents financially by choosing this, non-money making kind of career. I kind of felt the least I could do was give them the joy of getting them to see their son, who they hadn't seen for 7 years. So I said, chalo karte hain. So booked 3 tickets for all of us to go to the US. Flew them over to Cincinnati, which is where my brother used to live. And then I also got a ridiculously good thing called a VUSA fair, Visit USA fair, that used to exist in those days, where I got to travel to 13 cities for $460. Right? In those days, the dollar used to be some 30 rupees, something like that. So that was again ridiculously cheap, 15,000-20,000 rupees. And I had a lot of friends living in different cities. So I just reached out to all of them, said, can I come and, just stay, crash in your place for a couple of days? Most people said, yeah, sure, why not, etc. So I actually managed to, in 460 plus maybe another $50 or $100, travel to more than 12 cities for 40 days in the US.
Wow.
I think that was the best ROI. I was very, very curious about what the US is. So a lot of people say that traveling is a great way to learn, right? And I do believe in that. I don't, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I'm not much of a tourist. I've been to Agra 3 times. I've never seen the Taj Mahal. I couldn't care about it. I'm not that social, the literary, art, culture, that kind of a guy. But every city I've been to in my life, I've gone to the market street. looked at it, and I think I gain a lot more insights into how people are by looking at those places.
When you
I'm
say
very
market,
keen to. Sorry?
when you say market, what exactly?
Marketplace, the bazaar, street, right?
Okay.
This thing. Okay, basically. So I think you learn a lot from there. You learn about how people behave, thought processes, all of those kind of stuff. And something in the back of my mind always was, I had this question of what makes the US tick as a country. I was very, very keen to go. So I got a chance. So I said, "Bas ghar var bana ke kya karna hai?" I was very clear I was going to stay single in life. I didn't need a house. I could stay in a rented place. My plan was at some point if I shift back to Bombay, I'll stay with my parents. So I don't need a house. Kya karna hai? I went back to Sunil and I said, "Yaar, mera paisa wapas de do, ghar aap hi rakh lo." Took the money and did it. It was a great thing. I think easily the best investment I've made in my life, if you ask me. I think your stocks and other things can give you 5-fold, 10-fold, whatever return. I think many of us need to realize that that point about being a tool for society. I'm saying even if you're not as for society, even if you see yourself as a tool for your own good, I mean, what is, you build a house or whatever, what is your most productive asset in your life? It is yourself, right? It's your own brain, your own capabilities. And anything you can do to reinvest in yourself is going to give you the highest return on investment. And I think we look at it narrowly from point of view of doing courses and studying and all of that stuff. But I think we learn a lot through life, through exposure, and through stuff like that. So I think that was easily the best investment I made in my life. In hindsight, GiveIndia wouldn't have existed if I hadn't done that investment.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. The big takeaway for me here was around how we think of ourselves and our assets at various points in time. Very often, we just look at the financial assets and miss out on some of the non-financial ones. And this reminds me of my conversation with Professor Linda Grattan, the author of the book 100-Year Life, who speaks about how we can stay relevant over a prolonged period of time.
Well, as you know, in the book, we talked about 3 types of intangible assets. We talked about productive assets, vitality assets, and transformation assets. And I think really, in your 40s, the productive assets become really important because you need to keep on learning. You need to keep on building new skills. You need to be saying to yourself and to the labour market, I'm still somebody who's got a lot to offer from now until the age of 70. So that's really crucial. But also, of course, transformational assets. And those are, as we said earlier, transformational assets are a lot to do with your network. So if at 40 you find yourself spending all your time with people just like you, then that's not going to help you to transform. So you should be looking around and asking yourself, am I spending time with people who are different from me in terms of their nationality or their mindset or their age or their gender? Because in that diversity, you can begin to imagine what your possible selves are. I think 40 is a good time to think about possible selves.
I do think looking at our assets in a holistic sense can make a big difference in terms of how we think about choices and where we choose to invest. Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. And the other thing you mentioned in the passing was the decision to stay single, Venkat. Was that an easy decision? Because that's a
very easy decision.
That has a profound implication on the stuff that one can get.
It dramatically simplifies life, right? The moment you choose to stay single, your costs come down, your liabilities come down. So it gives you an extraordinary amount of financial freedom, right? You don't have to worry about having to earn enough all the time. You can't do anything about parents and family. You inherit that. Without them, you won't even exist. So that's a duty you owe back, and you need to do whatever you can. But why create more liabilities for yourself? So from the financial front, the other is emotional, right? I mean, like I told you, I'm going to see myself as negative emotional footprint. Why add more people to leave a negative emotional footprint on here? So, some poor girl, some poor kids, why? Just no logic.
Got it. And back to GiveIndia, where were the seeds of GiveIndia sown? Were they sown in that US trip, Venkat?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. That's what I meant when I said that GiveIndia probably wouldn't have existed if I hadn't done that US trip, right? So a lot of things that happened in that US trip. One is I was still running the school then, right? At IIMA. Right. So bulk of my trip was visiting schools in the US. So every city I went to, I visited the public schools. I visited a couple of private schools also, but US had very, very few private schools in those days. And so mostly it was public schools run by the government, stuff like that. And I would have visited at least 30 or 40 schools over those 40 days. I don't remember even one school that I went to that did not have parents volunteering in them. Mm. And most of these, I was some Lalu guy coming from the US, so it wasn't like from India. And, in those days, people hadn't even heard of India, many of them in the US. So it wasn't like they were dressing up their school for me or something like that. Many of these cases, when I walked in and met the principal and say, hi, you remember I told you I'm going to come. And those were pre-email days when barely people had email and stuff like that. And many of them, oh yeah, I completely forgot. Okay, chalo, kind of thing. So they didn't even prepare for it. But I don't remember a single school where a parent wasn't volunteering. Right? There were mothers helping, the teacher with cutting out images from magazines and stuff like that for the kids to do their project work. There were mothers working with the slow learning kids in the class so that the teacher can help the others. Mothers reading to the younger ones while the teacher did a play with the older kids. All of those kind of things. Doing a bake scale to raise money for the kids to go for a science project somewhere or a museum visit or stuff like that. So it was really amazing to see how much people cared. When we first landed, we spent a day sightseeing in New York. Worst day I had, waiting 8 hours in a queue to see Statue of Liberty, which is the most useless thing I did in my life, but my parents wanted to see it. They think it was one of the greatest days in their life. And then immediately after that, we went actually to Cincinnati, which is where my brother used to stay. And we were there for about 4 or 5 days before I moved out onto my trip. And then my parents stayed with him for a while and all of that stuff, right? So in that place where he stayed, Dayton, Cincinnati, it's a Twin City kind of a thing. He was living in a community which used to have a newsletter. And very interesting thing, I had nothing to do at home. We didn't have a computer in the house or anything like that. So I was just reading all the stuff. It was a very interesting article I read, or an ad kind of thing in that community newsletter, which said that, many of you must be first-time mothers whose kids are going to go to school in August when the schools reopen. You might be scared about it. So there's a community of us mothers whose kids have already been to school, and we're going to offer a free workshop for you on how to get prepared for your kid to go to school. I just read that and said, what a wonderful thing to even think of. ऐसा सोचते भी नहीं हमारे यहाँ, right? दूर तक नहीं सोचते. So that had a huge influence. I mean, whether it's that, whether it's seeing the parents volunteering in every single school that I visited, the only parent volunteering back in my own school in India was a parent who had come back from the US. And, so that also was playing in the mind. Then I visited a place called Burlington in Vermont, up there, north, where I actually didn't have any friends. So I was the principal. Actually, she was the district school superintendent, the lady I reached out to, elderly lady, and she actually offered for me to stay in her house. And so I went into a complete stranger's house and stayed in her house for a night. And she took me for a school district meeting. So there was a meeting happening where the parents had been invited. And so Burlington was going through a very funny situation. They had 3 schools, high schools, and they had to shut down one of them because they didn't have enough students. So the meeting was to discuss which school to shut down, right? And one of the most incredible things that happened is that some of the well-to-do parents who were there actually stood up and said, there were people from the black community, you could see they were not so well off and stuff like that. These well-to-do people actually stood up and said, please close down the school near our homes. Because we all have cars, we can afford to drop our kids, but these guys cannot afford to. And, that really hit me because, we took the flight from Bombay to New York. So I'd come back home for that from Ahmedabad. And the previous days, Times of India in Bombay had a very interesting article about, how there was a massive water scarcity in, Virar, Mira Road and the distant suburbs of Bombay. And the ridiculous thing is that's where all the lakes are, right? So we are taking their water and piping it to Malabar Hill for the bureaucrats and the rich people of the city. And here I'm, just look at the stark contrast of it. We live in a society here which is so selfish that we're stealing other people's water, leaving them in scarcity without water. Unka pani hum chori kar rahe hain. And here is a community which is saying, don't worry, close the school near us. We can ship our kids farther. I said, boss, ye ho kya raha hai? How do you... That was a thought. And then after I finished all my trips, my return flight was back in New York. So I came back to New York and I was reading the newspaper, the New York Times, and there was an editorial. Clinton was about to run for re-election at that point of time, I think, for his second term. A scathing article in New York Times or Wall Street Journal, I don't know which of those two, that Clinton's salary, the president's salary in the US used to be $210,000 a year then. And Clinton had donated $45,000 the previous year. So the article was critical, saying he gave only $45,000.
Wow.
And I was like hit by it, saying which India will ever do that. So, I came back, I was still running a school. So, I came back pretty much with a lot of other learnings around education and all of that. So that pretty much predominated my mind. But when we came back, we were running a school where we were also bringing in a lot of underprivileged kids into the school. And we were just trying to build a cross-subsidy model, but we hadn't reached the scale yet of even being self-sustainable, forget cross-subsidizing. So we actually reached out to a bunch of people. A lot of people started sponsoring a child's education in the school, stuff like that. And in fact, because we were in education, Sridhar and I and Sudhir, a lot of our batchmates who were beginning to do well started reaching out to us saying, I want to help somebody. Can you tell me which is a good organization? Kind of assuming that therefore we should know all the NGOs in India and stuff. So these things were lying at the back of our minds. And then, I must be very honest, the 24th November, the day I quit Eklavya, I had no clue what I was going to do next. Just decided to move on. And then, my brother had reached out to me. He had started doing well. So he sent me some, I think $1,000 or something that he wanted to donate. And so I started researching what to donate it for and came up with a couple of good organizations, gave the money there. And so it hit me, all these things kind of coalesced together. It wasn't like serendipity, as Sridhar Sitaram calls it.
But maybe if I may pick up on that, Venkat, this notion of quitting without what next in sight, it requires a certain mindset. Can you talk a little bit about the point in time where you decided to quit with no clear vision of what next?
So I think post Eklavya, starting with Eklavya, whenever I've quit something now, I will always quit without knowing what next.
Mm-hmm. But what
I think it makes sense to give 100% to whatever you are in.
But what was
the last possible moment that you can?
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. It's interesting that Venkat speaks about quitting his job without really knowing what's next. There's this phase where you're in between jobs or careers which can be quite disorienting. If this is a topic of interest to you, do tune into my conversation with Professor Herminia Ibarra, professor at London Business School, whose research transitions over the years and who speaks about the notion of liminality, which is this in-between phase which can be extremely uncomfortable. Needless to say, this approach also depends significantly on your life context and other dependencies. To contrast it with a different approach, when Amish Tripathi was faced with the choice of pursuing writing as a full-time career, he was a senior leader in the financial services world after graduating from IIM Calcutta. Here's what he said.
It was a pragmatic decision. Look, I come from a middle-class family, okay? So, I always joke कि भाई मेरे पास बाप दादा का आशीर्वाद है, जायदाद कुछ नहीं है. So, I have to be pragmatic and practical in my career decisions. I have responsibilities. I'm blessed with a child. I have a wife. So, I resigned only after my second book. When my royalty check became greater than my salary check. And even at that time, I was a member of the senior management committee at IDBI Federal Life Insurance. So hence I was not just involved with projects in my department. I used to look after marketing, product development and service quality for the company. But I was also involved in projects of other departments.
As a part of the leadership team?
Yeah. Okay. So I made sure I gave my boss a very long notice pay. I completed all my projects, including ones that I was involved in with other departments. I found my replacement and I trained him. Took him to SMC meetings for a few things so that he was, he got into the groove of it. And I resigned only at that time. My boss threw a farewell party for me, gave me a lovely, very large idol of Lord Shiva as a gift. And so I left on very good terms with him, and I told him at the farewell party also, Sir ji, kal kuch gadbad ho jaye, to main wapas aa jaunga naukri mein.
So you had the hedge.
I would say it's being pragmatic. And some people may call it boring. I call it being pragmatic. If you don't have family wealth to fall back on, you have to be practical in your career decisions.
A quick request from you if you're finding this conversation purposeful. This podcast is a labor of love and requires quite a bit of effort to identify the guests, research them, speak to them, editing the conversations, cross-referencing them with earlier insights, and so on. If you're deriving value from it, do take a moment to rate and review in Apple Podcasts or any other platform where you consume the content. It will help others discover the content and benefit from it. It will also help us raise the bar on the profile of people that we're able to bring on the platform. Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. But what led you to saying, I need to move on from Eklavya? What was brewing?
Well, the trigger was basically a slight, difference of view on how we wanted to run the school and stuff like that. But that was just one of the triggers, I guess. So the other was, of course, this point about impact that I mentioned earlier, right?
Understood.
So I moved out, and Sridhar had not yet moved out. Sridhar still had to finish the academic year. So it was going to be clear that he was going to be stuck for at least another 6-7 months. I couldn't just sit idle and do nothing. So all these things started coalescing in the brain and put together an idea saying, what about this revisit to the US trip in the head, saying, can we build a culture of giving in India like that, like the Americans are? And I started looking into it. That's when I first started researching online. I just bought a computer at that time. So I used to spend my whole day doing research or playing bridge online on Yahoo Pitch. It used to be exciting in those days that, your 4 of you are playing a round of bridge. One guy is from Dominica, another guy is from Turkey, third person is from some other part of the world, kind of thing. It's fascinating. So I just started doing a lot of research. That's when I started getting a lot of information around it, right? So how much does the US as a country give? $188 billion that time, 2000, which was 1.9% of their GDP in those days. Then I did research. We had no data on giving in India, but whatever little data led me to get a conclusion that we were at 0.1% of GDP. And that, anecdotally we all knew it, but there was some data pointing towards the fact that we were.
This is philanthropy or philanthropy plus CSR?
CSR didn't exist in India in 2000. It was negligible. So it was like a very surprising thing. And then the thought grew कि यार ये 0.1 को अगर हम 0.5% भी कर देंगे तो बहुत बड़ी चीज है. It's worth spending a lot of time on. And for me, giving was not about the money ever. It still never is. I don't think the money that you give. So let's suppose you do make it even 2% of GDP. It's nothing, right? The government of India's taxes are close to 12% of GDP now. And if that 12% of GDP is not getting spent well, and that is meant to uplift the state of society, 2% से क्या फर्क पड़ जाने वाला? I think it's all about how that 2% gets used that's going to make a difference. And the belief was very clear that if people care for the society, then you will have a much happier society. Belief is definitely not about how much money you raise, but how many people's consciences can we touch? How many people can we reach and make them feel that this is my country and I need to do something back for it? Right?
And I think picking up on that, Venkat, a lot of the philanthropy often ends up being event-based, right? I think as I was doing the research, you speak about raising close to 1 crore in a week when Gujarat earthquake happened. But you say that the following year you raised only 25 lakhs.
11 lakhs, yes.
11 lakhs. Wow. So I'm curious about what you've learned about moving people from responding piecemeal when there's an event to instituting a culture of giving as a way of life.
I don't see the two as incompatible.
Either or.
It's not neither or. In fact, well, actually, with disasters, there is a bit of an issue. I think COVID is a huge exception to this. But otherwise, from my experience with the Gujarat earthquake, the tsunami, the Orissa cyclone, and stuff like that, if it were up to me, I actually wouldn't mind putting a full-page ad in the papers a day after the disaster, saying, please do not give. However counterintuitive it sounds, because actually disasters create far greater supply of money than the need is. And I've seen it firsthand. In Gujarat, after the earthquake, we were helping people rebuild their homes, and we would go to people and say, here is the rubble, you help clear it off, and we'll pay you to, we'll give you the materials to help build your home and stuff like that. And people used to say, no, but XYZ NGO has told me they will pay me 90 rupees a day to clear my own rubble. How much will you pay? Right? So it's money is an oversupply. There's a joke going around that if you really want to make money, wherever there's a disaster, go and set up a 3-star hotel. You'll make shitloads of money. Everybody will want to come and descend there to help. You make a lot of money out of selling hotel rooms. But yeah, so I mean, disasters are normally like that. COVID is a huge exception to that. Variety of reasons, one of which it's not a short disaster, it's a protracted, long one. And it's also impacted everybody. So it's not invoking just sympathy ki wo bechara, but it is, it could well happen to me tomorrow, and therefore much more from an empathy space than
you're right. Yeah.
So COVID is definitely a huge exception to that, and we can talk more about it later. But yeah, I think the larger thought has been, how do we get people to care about society? The giving journey earlier and the volunteering journey now are both about the same at the end of the day. It's about how do we get people to care more about society. You look at the amount of sacrifice people made during the independence struggle, right? I can't imagine us going through that right now. If you had to, as a country, decide that let's boycott Chinese goods, I don't think even the fans of BJP will do it. Forget anybody else. I'm saying, even if you're a deep believer in Narendra Modi, you're unlikely to have the willingness to pay the personal price of not buying Chinese goods. Right? Fundamentally a selfish society in that sense. Self-interest tends to dominate. And I think it's only if you learn to care about others that you can actually build a happy society. Otherwise, as long as you're only looking out for yourself, it's not going to change things.
And back to, given you've spent so much time in this, thinking about this very fundamental piece around mindset, the way we approach life, Venkat, what are some of the misconceptions you see around the notion of giving and philanthropy in the way the people think about it? What are the common mistakes you see people make in the way they frame it in their head?
There might be multiple different misconceptions. One, of course, is the most common one is the need to directly see the impact of your giving immediately. The need for instant gratification in giving is very high. And I actually don't blame people who are at that. I think it's early stage of your giving journey, you're bound to be like that. We need to build giving products that allow for that instant gratification. I think the fundraising business in India hasn't learned that as well as it should. And if you meet that instant gratification, people then move on to other things over a period of time. The need for instant gratification, if it persists too long, then you wind up taking a lot of giving decisions that are short-term value but not long-term impact. Right?
Could you give an example just to illustrate the point?
So, feeding a child versus helping, the family build its own livelihood so that the father can feed the child for the rest of the child's life, as one example. Or many such examples. I think whenever we choose to focus on, the teach a man to fish versus give the man a fish example, there are situations where it is important to give the fish, obviously, because you're going to die of starvation. There's no point teaching you how to fish. But I think we're not always in that situation. I think far more often than not, we tend to focus on the immediate amelioration rather than the building of the capacity to solve the problem by the person on their own, so to say. So I think that is one definite challenge. Another big misconception is this allergy to overheads that people have, right? And I distinguish between fundraising cost and overhead. I think allergy to fundraising cost is very, very good and very healthy. In an ideal world, we should drive fundraising costs down to as close to zero as possible, because fundraising actually serves no other purpose than raise the money for the NGO. Right? So if there was a situation where it could reach 0%, that is really ideal. It's a necessary evil, right? But if you look at the rest of the overheads of an organization, I think biggest misconception is that NGOs should have low overheads. I think it's the stupidest approach to giving that one could have. And I keep telling people this, right? So for example, if you go out there and buy a toothpaste, a tube of Colgate toothpaste, do you really care what percentage of that toothpaste went to Katrina Kaif for modeling that toothpaste, right? Or do you even care what percentage is profit or what percentage overhead, etc.? All you care is how much is this costing me and what is the value you are delivering. Right? I think as philanthropists, as givers, we need to move towards that, where we ask ourselves, I don't care about all of where the money is getting spent. You tell me what is the outcome you're going to deliver. So I think there's a desperate need to get more people to shift towards outcome orientation in their philanthropy. I think that's another big misconception, that overheads need to be low and all of that kind of stuff. And it results in a lot of, people will just recast the way they state their financials so that they'll show low overheads.
Fair. And, in your first annual report, as I was reading about 2 decades back, you talk about a paragraph that you wish you saw in 2020, which actually says, "Dear stakeholders, GiveIndia is closed down as donors are directly engaged with the NGOs, and there's no need for an organization like GiveIndia." As you take stock, given where we are today, Venkat, how do you see the job to be done?
Yeah, I think long way to go. I think, it was more wishful thinking than this thing. And also, I think when you're young, you think change is easy. As you grow older, you realize how difficult it is, especially behavior change in a society and stuff like that. And you also, a school of hard knocks also helps you realize how ordinary you are. When you're young and full of successes, you think you're a rock star. So maybe a lot of that had to go into that thought process. But the intent was very clear that, like I said, fundraising costs are a parasite. They should ideally not exist. So I was very clear, and it's a sentence I use a lot, and that gets a lot of people very upset. I actually say it often in order to dramatize it. My favorite sentence nowadays is, every NGO is like a boil on the forehead of society, right? And it gets a lot of people upset because, NGOs are doing such fabulous work, so why are you... But, boil on your forehead is a symptom of something wrong with you deeper inside, right? So the existence of an NGO actually is a reflection that our government is not doing its job. It's a reflection that as a society, we don't care enough about people, right? Peter Drucker said a very interesting thing. He said that the purpose of philanthropy above everything is that, and he said it in American context, obviously, so that he said that every American, when he looks in the mirror, should see 2 things: a citizen who takes responsibility and a neighbor who cares. The 2 cornerstones of what the goal of philanthropy is, to leave the philanthropist as a citizen with responsibility and a neighbor who cares. So giving is a lot more about the giver than about the receiver, right? And if we can make this happen, if every Indian becomes a citizen who takes responsibility and a neighbor who cares, then we'll solve the problem, right? We don't need to worry about malaria. If everybody cares, they'll solve malaria.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. About 4 years back, I joined a group of philanthropists and became part of an organization called Social Venture Partners, or SVP in short. The thesis behind this is that organizations need help beyond funding, and a lot of it is around capacity building, which are often seen as overheads by donors. Things like leadership development, building out tech infrastructure, and so on. It is through SVP that I got introduced to Antarang Foundation and its founder Priya Agrawal, and started working with them. Seeing the potential of one of the students from Antarang, I decided to hire 2 of their students as editors for my podcast. One of them, Akash, for example, wants to set up an independent consulting practice over the long term, and I'm trying to do my bit in setting him up towards that. I can relate to Venkat's point here that it's a journey, and you slowly move from giving fish to solving for deeper issues that are there, and you figure out your role in the system based on the skills you bring and what gives you energy. All I can say is it's been 3-4 years in this journey, and it's been an extremely fulfilling one for me. Here's Govind Iyer, the recently appointed chair of Social Venture Partners in India, and the person that got me started on this journey of philanthropy. He speaks about why he chose to participate in Living My Promise, which is around giving away 50% of your wealth.
Hi. Living My Promise is a fabulous movement that started in India by a few very well-meaning individuals. When I heard about it, I instantly signed up because I felt it's the best way for me as an individual to give back to all those that have given me over the last many years of my life. It's rare that one comes across an opportunity to do something for human civil society and for human beings. And I saw Living My Promise as a great option to get together with a bunch of promisers, all with the same singular focus of making a difference to civil society. That's what led me to join up. That's what makes me so excited about making a difference. I do want to mention that it's not all about money. It's also about engagement, it's also about passion, it's also about impact. So whether you're 30 years of age or whether you're 60 years of age or older, start giving now and start giving through the best way you think works for you. There is no one way for all. Everybody has to choose their own journey.
Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. And in the work I do, Venkat, when I work with leaders in transition, they often hit a point around midlife where, as you rightly said, in the context of some of your batchmates, they achieve a certain material comfort and they want to give back to the society, but often struggle to find the right mechanism. So in your experience, how should people think about giving time, money, and attention in no particular order? But where are some of the common areas where people trip up in the way they end up giving versus how they should actually think about giving?
Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge for a lot of extremely successful people is time is a hugely short commodity, right? And so therefore they start by giving money. And, it gives you some joy. So you can give a little bit of money. But my biggest learning is beyond a point, money is not going to make a difference. And after the point, you'll start getting frustrated that, you're giving money, but kuch ho nahi raha. It's only when you actually start getting involved with your time that you actually start seeing the nuances involved, the difficulties involved, the challenges involved. And you start enjoying your giving. Writing checks brings no joy. But actually volunteering your time, and volunteering does not mean you're going and teaching a child or anything like that. You could be sitting and helping the NGO chalk out its communication plan. You could be helping them put together a financial management system. It's anything that you could be doing for an organization. But you're part of the solution, right? You're not just sitting outside the box and giving gyan to somebody else. And I would say that if people can invest however much little time they can, a lot of people might think that, 2 hours a week is too much time for me to be able to set aside. I can afford to give away 50,000 rupees more every week instead of those 2 hours. And my point to you is, if you can give only 50,000 rupees a week, then sure, give only 50,000 rupees a week. But I would rather that you get 25,000 a week and 1 hour of your time. And I can assure you the impact of that is far higher. Far higher. Right? Because, let's face it, right? If whoever is paying you 25,000 rupees a week or whatever, an hour for your time, whether it's a McKinsey or any other, company that you're working for, they're not idiots, right? And they're paying you 25,000 rupees an hour because the value add you're bringing to the table is much more than that. So why do you devalue your own time when it comes to working in the social sector? In fact, here the impact is far higher, right? Because, whatever you do, there is no proprietorship, there is no intellectual property restrictions. So any value that you add has the potential to get scaled manyfold as compared to in a business or a private sector kind of an organization. So I think if people could somehow find it in them to say, I'll give a little time and balance it. Don't do only time. I think it's great to do only time, but most NGOs will not value you if you give only time. So I think it's useful to give a combination of time and money. So for a lot of people who have, I think if you're not earning and you don't have money, then please give time. I think that's extremely valuable. But if you have both, I would say do the right combination of both. Give some amount of time, at least 2 hours a month, 3 hours a month. Start with something as small as that, and then I don't have to say anything. If you start with 3 hours a month, you will eventually get sucked in. I have enough friends who started with a couple of hours a month who are now doing 20 days a month of volunteering.
This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. Coming back to Social Venture Partners, the organization that I'm associated with, I guess what's been fulfilling is that it seems to be a healthy mix of time and money in the way we engage with the selected NGOs. We pool in a certain financial contribution from each partner and then choose how to deploy the corpus. And that's a structured process where we evaluate several organizations. Once we pick a few, we then have teams engage with some of these organizations. And this is like a combination of venture investing and management consulting at some level. The fact that you're in the company of several other like-minded people makes the journey even more rewarding, apart from the fact that you're deriving fulfillment from your contribution to the NGO. If you want to know more, do email me at deepak.jayaraman@transitioninsight.com. I'm happy to connect you to the right person, depending on the geography you live in. Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. But the other reason I ask Venkat is, there's also the other chain of thought which says that if I want to make a difference and make an impact, but let's say I'm in a place, let's say I'm a private equity investor, and I'm able to multiply my money at a certain accelerated pace, maybe I sort of build that up and then probably donate a larger corpus which can move the needle in a bigger way. How do you think about, does that come up in your conversations about that trade-off?
Yeah, so one of the things Mohandas Pai said to me long back, about 10 years ago, has stuck with me for a long time. Very, very interesting thing. So Mohandas Pai said, corpus is the capitalization of misery.
Wow.
Right? Very interesting thing to say. And that stuck with me for a long time. So, you can do very simple math on this. The social return on investment for even inefficient non-profits is at least 4 or 5 times higher than the highest returning for-profit investments. Right? So the average social return on philanthropic investments is somewhere in the order of 6 to 9 months payback of capital. Right? And I'll illustrate with a few examples. A cataract surgery for a slightly old farmer in a village. Right? Buddha ho gaya, mid-50s, early 60s, both eyes cataract, can't work in the field. Right? Cataract surgery cost is now 2,000 rupees. Earlier much lower, but now 2,000 rupees. Can't afford it, doesn't do it. Winds up doing all kinds of other stuff, gets paid 30 rupees a day, 20 rupees a day, doing this thing, gets dejected, gets ill-treated at home, everything like that, right? You get this guy a cataract surgery, he will start earning 3,000 rupees a month at the barest minimum, even in a village, incrementally, over the 30 rupees a day he was making. 2,000 rupiah payback is 3,000 rupees a month. What is that ROI? Show me any bloody investment will give me that ROI. I'll make that investment tomorrow. I put all my cash into that fund. If anybody gives even 1/4 of that return, right? Or you take schooling for a child, right? A good child schooling, 10 years of schooling, cost you about 2 lakhs or 3 lakh rupees. Very good schooling, not the fancy private schools. But at the very least, it will put that kid on a incremental 5 to 10,000 a month earning journey, or even higher. Again, look at the payback. I'm spending 2 lakhs and earning 10,000 bucks a month more. It's like a 12-15 month payback. And this is a long, it's not even 5,000 a month more for the rest of my life. That gap keeps growing if you look at it, right? If I'm a plumber for the rest of my life versus if I'm a, even an accountant for the rest of my life.
The NPV is it's a different order of magnitude, right? As you said.
Correct. So any social impact. And so this is something that we keep discussing even in our Living My Promise group. And I keep asking myself the same question, which is that, money, if I put money in somewhere and invest it and it gets me 12, 15, even 18% return on investment, there are people getting hurt today. If I put all my money to use today, the return to society is far higher than if I compound it at 20, 30, 40%, 100% per annum, right? And then give away a much larger pot later on. The problems would have multiplied so much more. If I put a kid through good schooling today, the next several generations of that kid's family are going to be great, right? Their healthcare issues are going to get sorted, a whole bunch of things. Their outlook to life is going to be better. Their financial discipline is going to be better. So many other social outcomes that will come out of it. 30 years I don't give and I just keep accumulating it into a corpus. The problems are actually multiplying at a faster rate than your compounding rate is.
Very interesting.
And so therefore giving away today is the best thing to do. Of course, like I said earlier, everything you put in a context. So the direct therefore question to me is, why haven't I therefore given away everything I have? And the answer is because I'm trying to bring about specific change in some areas and I don't have. So if I could, I would do that. Actually,
so that goes back to the point.
If I had a scalable solution to do what I'm trying to do today, I would spend all the money today.
Fair.
It's not coming out of any insecurity or anything like that.
Fair.
And one of the things I did do in COVID, and a bunch of other people I know did, many friends, we stepped up our giving significantly. So I kind of met my full year's giving target in the first 1.5 months of COVID this year. So gave far more than I was expecting to give in all of this year in the first 2 months.
The other piece I wanted to discuss, Venkat, was just attitude towards money, right? And in a lot of ways, I guess how we give, one of the prerequisites for that is the way we relate with money. And what are some of the common places where you see people trip in the way they relate to money? And therefore it coming in the way of their approach to giving.
Yeah, I think, I think there must be definitely evidence that money brings happiness up to a certain point. I think that's a no-brainer.
Right.
But after a certain point, the law of diminishing marginal returns will definitely kick in, and the incremental value of money tends to go down. Unfortunately, the process of wealth creation does a lot of things in terms of our attitude formation. Right? You create wealth by participating in the rat race. If you don't participate in the rat race, you won't create wealth.
Yeah.
In the first place. So participating in the rat race then becomes a habit. Once it's become a habit, your money starts becoming a lot of other things to you. It's your social status, it is your prestige, it is how your family sees you, it is how you want your family to see themselves relative to other families. It's, where my friend went for a vacation versus where I went for a vacation, living up with the Joneses, as they say, Sharma ji ka beta dekho kya kar raha hai kind of stuff, all of that. So I think you get caught into that trap after a point of time. I think that's the problem with money, is that it's kind of like a drug. You get addicted to it, and you get addicted to creating more and more of it. Money also brings a lot of power, right? Yep. Even philanthropically speaking, one of the biggest challenges for philanthropists to not give away all their wealth, even when they can, is because they wonder what will they do after that. Because today, every time an NGO comes with folded hands to them, there is this huge feeling of power that you have, right? And if you give away all your money, then you're losing all that power also. I'm sure that plays in the back of people's minds around why they don't give it all away up front. Money brings a lot of power everywhere. And I think people get used to that. So that's also a drug. You get used to that thing. I think these are the deleterious effects of money. And I think we get caught in that trap, then you get sucked deeper and deeper into the vortex. And after a point, it becomes difficult to pull yourself out.
And therefore, how have you thought about getting people to think about how much to give? Currently, Living My Promise, you are urging people to consider 50% of their net worth, is it?
Yes.
Net worth. So can you tell us a little bit about how you've thought about, how much? And
I think the easiest way to do it is identify what you really need. Gandhiji used to say there's enough in the world for everybody's need and not for even one man's greed. I think identify what you need. The earlier you do it, the better in life. Because as we get older, our needs we get used to more and more things, and then our needs start growing. When we were kids, somebody in the neighborhood used to have a telephone. You used to be very lucky if somebody in your neighborhood had a telephone, right? So a telephone was not a need. Washing machine was definitely not a need. Fridge was not a need. TV was not a need. None of these things are need. Now all of these have become very basic essentials. Now so even the Roomba is becoming a need for most people. So I think the earlier you can make this choice, the better it is. And in that sense, I think, for Sridhar, me, Sudhir, the fact that we quit the corporate world and went into the non-profit space very early in our lives is actually a very big thing before we really hit the major big bucks. Otherwise, we would have got used to business class travel, 5-star. In Sony, in IBM, we were all traveling, not business class, but traveling flights, staying in 5-star hotels. But it was like 1 year of that experience. So we got out of it pretty quickly before it became a habit. Right? And when we were in Eklavya, we used to go and stay in places where we used to pay 150 rupees a room night, 50 rupees a room night, lodges, other stuff like that. And you realize ki chalta hai life yaar usme. The lodge is like your home, right? In our homes, we never used to have AC in those days.
Right. This is your host Deepak Jayaraman here. A similar anecdote came up in my conversation with Prakash Iyer, a fellow IIMA alumnus and ex-country head of Kimberly-Clark, and now a coach and an author. He speaks about how his relationship with money gave him the freedom to pursue what he really cared about.
I'd probably say this, that as some, like a lot of other kids coming out of middle-class India, financial goals were important in the early stages of our lives. And therefore, it was important for you to kind of make enough bread and butter and some jam. But beyond that, I guess I've been swayed by this guy. There's this interesting story of how Joseph Heller apparently was at this party thrown by an investment banker in New York.
This is the guy who wrote Catch 22.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Joseph Heller was, but a friend of his took him along and said, come, it's a great party. You'll meet all the who's who of the city. And as he went there, it was a great evening, lots of crystal, the finest wine. And as Joseph Heller stood sipping a drink, his friend said, do you realize that our host, the investment banker, probably makes more money in a day than you do than you have in a lifetime? And Joseph Heller said, that's probably true. But you know something? I have something he'll never have. And the friend says, what? And Joseph Heller says, enough. And that's a story that's kind of stayed with me. And in a sense, I think I spent the last few years of my life saying, hey, I think I need to learn to say enough. And the minute I know I have enough, you're sorted. Right. You don't really need to worry about it. And then you're free to go and do what you want to do.
If you're into Bollywood, then this is like the English equivalent of the dialogue from the movie Diwar between Amitabh Bachchan and Shashi Kapoor. A slightly modified version of the dialogue would capture the essence of the point here, where Amitabh would say, मेरे पास गाड़ी है, बंगला है, प्रॉपर्टी है, बैंक बैलेंस है, क्या है तुम्हारे पास, हैं, क्या है? And Shashi Kapoor would pause for a couple of seconds, look him in the eye and say, मेरे पास enough है. Personally speaking, trying to adopt an I have enough mindset than I need more mindset has been tremendously liberating for me and empowering in terms of the personal and professional choices that I've gotten to make over the last few years. A lot of us who come from middle-class backgrounds believe that our attitudes towards money are what they were when we were kids. But as Venkat says, the process of wealth accumulation, unbeknownst to us, slowly but steadily changes our attitudes towards money. Here's a perspective from another individual, Sudhir Shenoy, who was a fellow member in Social Venture Partners in Mumbai and head of Dow Chemicals in India. And he speaks about why he signed up for Living My Promise.
At some level, I always knew that I was committed to giving a significant part of my wealth towards philanthropy. But Living My Promise helped put some structure into it. It made it more formal for myself. It helped me to start taking concrete actions versus kind of figuring it out later on. It forced me to think about whether I wanted to give it to a specific cause, a specific organization, whether I wanted to retain some part of it for something that I would be involved myself in my retirement days and so on. Additionally, it's helped me network into a wonderful family of philanthropists, a great network that helps me connect to others who are associated with similar and other causes, a lot of learning opportunity. And of course, eventually it also created a buzz amongst my network. A lot of other people, it forces them to start thinking about how they want to approach things, especially as people in my network get into their 50s and start to think about the next phase of life. So all in all, it's been a fantastic journey thus far.
Now, let's go back to the conversation with Venkat Krishnan. Right.
Luxury to have an air conditioner in a home in those days. कभी नहीं जिंदगी में AC देखा था तो क्या जरूरत है? So I think the earlier in your life you can make these calls, the better. But the larger point being, if you can identify what your basic needs are and say, okay, this much and no further, and everything else I have more than that, I'm going to give up. I would say that's the best thing.
Got it.
And I'm honestly not fussed about what you give it away for. I'm saying give it away to your relatives who are in less good shape than you. Give it to a temple, church, masjid, whatever you want to, or give it for a philanthropy cause, whatever you want to, but alienate the money away from yourself. And I think there's a big advantage to the individual in it. I think when it's de-addicting yourself from money, right? That's the beauty of that. When you give away everything you don't need, or you at least set it aside saying this is not mine, it's so liberating, it's not funny. You're no longer dependent on money. You're no longer addicted to it anymore, right? So tomorrow you want to quit your private equity job, you want to quit your consulting job because you have an anal boss, or you want to, or just getting too much, you got no work-life balance, you want to spend time with family, whatever it is. I think not needing money is the most liberating experience you can have, right? The other one being not having any family. It's a very liberating experience in the sense of not having a wife, kids, etc. Because, I mean, honestly, if I want to go to, the tribal Andamans and spend the rest of my life there today, I can do it. I don't have to worry about a kid who needs to go to a good school or a wife who doesn't want to come there or anything else like that, right? I don't owe anything to anybody. I can just get up and go. And I think similarly, if you keep your needs very simple and low, and I'm not saying stop earning. Please make as much money as you can out of your private equities and McKinseys of the world. But if you can keep your needs lower and lower and lower, it's far more empowering for you. You have that much more freedom and control over your own life. And at the end of the day, that's what more important in your life than having control over it yourself?
Venkat, you've also spent in the context of spreading the word around giving. I'm sure you've interacted with enough philanthropists, the older generation, the younger generation. As a parent of two young children, I'm curious about what have you seen some of the people do who've amassed a lot of wealth, but when you see that they've raised children who are sort of quite giving and grounded, are there a few things that stand out in terms of how they've managed that? Because one of the concerns I have is, are we bubble wrapping too much, right? So what's been your insight around this?
Yeah. No, I think easily the best examples of great parenting in that context of bringing responsible kids, etc., is people who have not bubble wrapped their kids. They've kind of applied this, what I need for myself principle to the kids as well. So given the kids all the comforts they want, so kids do get Nike shoes and all of that kind of stuff. They don't have to go and buy a cheap canvas shoe or something like that. But also saying, but this much and no further. Limited pocket money, limited access to resources, and saying no to the child a lot of time. I think it's a very important thing that these people have done in helping the child learn that, the world is not an endless stream of resources. That is number one. The number two thing that they've done is they've all involved their children in philanthropy. So a lot of people that I've seen have been involving their kids in their giving, whether it's taking the kids along. Sometimes it's done consciously, many times it's done even unconsciously, right? So a lot of people, when I talk to about their own giving journeys now, talk about how they saw their parents doing it as a child, right? So somebody saw their parents, that postman aata tha, to usko ghar ke andar bula ke chai pilate the. These things, Stephen Covey, again, I'm sorry, I go back to him often, says this wonderful thing. He says, your actions are so loud, I can't hear a word you say, right? I think kids are ridiculously intuitive on that. They pick on your actions, your behavior far more than, any amount of preaching and storytelling that you can do. So I think that has been another very important thing where I've seen people bring up compassionate children. It's often by creating opportunities for their kids. So it could be celebrating the child's birthday with some other children in a less privileged place, taking them along for the various philanthropic activities that they do, talking to the child a lot about these issues, getting the child to reflect. Reflection is a great tool. The more we can get people to reflect, including children, huge way to help build great, thoughtful children. So, I think
when you say reflect, are you talking about a particular any particular process?
I'd say like one of the best things about LEM as a course, Sunil Landa used to tell us to write reflective notes. The way the course was graded, we had no exams. He said thrice in the term, I'll just put a pause. I'll say you learned something with the last 4 sessions. Just reflect on it and write a 3-page note or a 5-page note. There was no limit. You could write 1 page, write 18 pages. And then because he had to give a grade, he would give us a grade for those notes. But I think it was a phenomenal idea because a lot of time learning kind of stays superficially in our brains and it gets deeply internalized when you reflect. I think that if you could get, and reflection makes you think a lot more than you normally do. We are getting today so much stimulated, with all our Netflixes and Primes and all of that kind of stuff. Our attention spans are down. We can barely read a book. I think reflection can slow you down, can bring stillness into you, and it can actually help you think through a lot of things a lot. To the extent that we can get children. So, for example, you take your kid out for a walk. Kid comes back, will typically say something, right? वो ऐसा क्यों बैठा था भिखारी इतने गंदे कपड़े पहन के, something like that, right? And most of us will have 1 or 2 responses. The tendency of the parent will be to answer the question. बेचारा गरीब है, क्यों गरीब है, पता नहीं ये. Or some other person might actually have a very different view on it and say, पियक्कड़ है, सारा पैसा दारू पी के, इसलिए आपको दारू नहीं पीना चाहिए. So, there's a teaching opportunity for the child kind of a thing, etc. And I think it's a wasted opportunity. Wonderful opportunity to actually not answer the kid, right? I think when the kid is 3, 4, 5, 6, you probably need to answer a lot of their questions. I would say even as early as 4 or 5, can we at least start throwing back their questions to them? And asking them, why do you think he was there like that? And trust me, I think the kid will learn a lot more if they are given that opportunity to exercise their brains. I think people will reach compassionate conclusions much faster if they think.
The other piece I was curious about, Venkat, was even giving. There is you can run it as a sprint or you can do it like a marathon. Back to your point about your hours in Eklavya. At some level, as we think about giving as a career, any thoughts to people on how they should think about their approach to giving, both time and money? Once again, do you see people trip up in the way they run it over the long term versus short term? Any thoughts there?
So first is I try not to preach on this for a variety of reasons. I think it's like some of these things have to evolve. You have to learn through experience. No amount of somebody else telling you is going to make these things happen. When you start any journey, and giving, like any other thing, is a journey that you will have in your life, be one of the multiple journeys you'll have in your life, right? Giving being one of those strands of journeys that you take. It's, I think, unrealistic to expect a person at the beginning of a journey to make a long-term commitment. Right? Somebody says, okay, I bought a new car, I want to take it out for a spin, and you say, okay, let's go to Agartala from Bombay. You're mad, right? It's a stupid thing to ask the person. Let him take it out for a 5-kilometer spin, come back. Let him get used to driving the car. मजा आने लगेगा अपने आप धीरे-धीरे किसी दिन अगरतला भी पहुंच जाएंगे, right? You have to get people to enjoy the experience. That's the natural evolution of it. So I like not to prescribe on this. I think let people get started on their journey, whatever it is. Right? And that's why, I'm saying that even if you can't do 1 hour a month, it's okay. You can do 1 hour a year, utna se start karo. Jitna kar sakte ho, karo. Get started on the journey. Enjoy it. Get into it. Reflect about it. So I gave 20,000 rupees last year. Kuch maza aaya kya? And the point about reflection is, that's the other thing, right? If you don't reflect, you gave 25,000 last year, kuch nahi hua. Nobody. A lot of people who discontinue giving, in GiveIndia we used to do a lot of surveys of people who had discontinued their giving. And the answer used to be, I gave so much money to this organization, they never sent me a report, I don't know what happened, so I stopped giving. And I would say, so that's the wrong, thing, right? I mean, if the journey starts with the assumption that my giving must get me this immediately, then you're not going to. But can we build a experimentational journey into giving? Start, reflect. So I gave this guy, he never got back to me. Horrible. That doesn't mean I have to stop giving. What does it mean in terms of how I give next? Right? So the next person I give to, can I ask them before I give, what are you going to tell me? What are you going to come back to me with? And then give. And then your next experience is, he promised this, but he still didn't give it. Right? You still don't get disillusioned. You say, I will still give. But the next time, I'm going to be even more smarter about it. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to give you this money, but I'm going to give it to you only in installments. And after this installment, you give me this. Then I'll give you the rest, and then you give me the rest. And stuff like that. And you gradually evolve your giving journey that way. Right?
Fair enough. And Venkat, you've sort of, what boggles my mind is sort of the largeness of the vision, right? To sort of, to inculcate a spirit of giving in India. How have you thought about success or impact, or just as you reflect on your journey, how do you think about keeping track of where you are in the context of what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. No, so two things. First is, I think that vision is extremely, extremely, extremely ambitious, and I have no two doubts in my mind that I am not going to achieve that in my lifetime. I'm going to die a failure, right? And that doesn't worry me a little bit also. I'm perfectly happy being a failure in life. I don't need to prove myself to anybody. So it's okay to fail and die. I'd rather also that if any successes happen, I give the credit off to somebody else, because it helps people to get credit, right? I mean, especially people who have family, kids, etc. It helps them to have your kids think highly of you, your spouses think highly of you. मेरे को किसी से कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता. The world can think I'm a useless guy. मेरे को क्या फर्क पड़ता है? It doesn't make any difference to me. So I'm more than happy to die a failure, which is what I will be. So the idea, therefore, is don't worry about how large the goal is. Set that ambitious goal. Fail to hona hi hai. It doesn't matter. Why set a small goal and fail? Set a large goal and fail. Right? So I think the vision has nothing to do with how large it is or not. It has got more to do with what the vision is by itself. So the vision is very simple. It's how do you build a caring society? Now somebody else may look at it and say, how do you build a caring world, right? So if you look at John Lennon and Imagine as a song, his vision is the whole world. And if you look at Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as an idea, that's a much bigger vision than what I have, right? If you look at Gandhi's vision of non-violence peace across the world, he wrote letters to Adolf Hitler saying, don't do what you're doing. Right? In that sense, I think I've been relatively much more myopic. I'm focused on India. I've never bothered about what happens in, other parts of the world. Not that one shouldn't, but so it's just, I felt from childhood about the country, and I kind of felt that kuch karna chahiye. So it's as simple as that people should care. And I think if somebody says my vision is to work for Bombay, I think it's a brilliant vision to have. I don't think visions in themselves are big or small. And I can tell you that somebody who's really passionate and really committed to their vision is bound to fail in their vision. It's not possible to succeed, right? Because the visions are always about being better and better and better. So there is no end to becoming better, right? When you say, I want Bombay to become better, that vision can never be fulfilled. Because no matter how good it becomes, it can still become better. You want to rid the world of all diseases, unless you said, so like, if you look at Bill Gates, for example, he set a vision saying, I want to put an end to polio. To ho gaya. But he has other visions. We had a very interesting conversation when we were running GiveIndia. We got Bill Gates to come and talk to some of our people. And so one young kid asked him, how would you like to be remembered when you're dead? What would you like to be remembered for? And he had a very interesting answer, right? The answer was, I think long after I'm dead, I will most probably not be remembered. And if I am successful, I will definitely not be remembered. So when you ask why, he said, so he asked this kid about 10 years ago, the kid was about 10 years old, have you heard of something called smallpox? The kid said, no, what is that? Is it something like chickenpox or something like that, right? And the beauty is somebody worked to eradicate smallpox. And the beauty of eradicating as a disease is a generation later, nobody remembers the disease. So how will you even remember who eradicated it? So if I put malaria out in my lifetime, or if I put polio out in my lifetime, next generation is not even going to know what is malaria. That's the best indicator of success.
And if I were to ask you the question that the child asked Bill Gates, how would you like to be remembered when you're...
I don't want to be remembered. I'm very, very clear. I actually, to me, an ideal world is the day I'm gone, the rest of the world continues as if I never existed. Zero footprint. Right? So why should people remember? I mean, there's so many other wonderful people to be remembered and inspire people. Why take away from that? And
in your journey, you've come across several givers, philanthropists, whatever we call them. Are there 3-4 people that have really inspired you in terms of the way they think about it?
Many, right? First is, of course, fictional characters or mythological or whatever you would call them. Karna, for example. If you read some of the stories of his giving, it's like ridiculous that a person can give away this much of themselves. Right? And when Krishna comes to in the battlefield after he's beaten and about to die, the form of a Brahmin, and says, I'm scared because this guy had so much punya, wo agar kisi ko curse de dega to bahut hurt ho jayega. And he comes, this guy is a Brahmin and says, give me. And Karna says, I have nothing left, I've given away everything. And he says, no, but you have your punya, so can you give that to me? And Karna says, theek hai, le lo. And he gives away even his punya. So he says, I don't even want that, wo bhi le jao. Credit, nothing I want. So I think that deeply inspirational. I read Mahabharata when I was in 3rd standard and 4th standard, Rajgopalchari's version. And, huge influence on me. So whether it's that, so some of this, the ultimate selfless giving of wanting absolutely nothing back for yourself is really very powerful. The other is, of course, Mahabali's story. We just had Onam yesterday, right? That when the Lord comes in the form of Vamana to him and says, he says, okay, I want to take 3 steps and you give me that land. And he says, go ahead and take it. And he takes 1 step, covers the earth, 1 step, covers the skies. He says, now where do I keep my 3rd step? He bends down and puts his head and says, keep it on my head. And knowing full well that when the Lord will do that, he will cease to exist. I think, what powerful these stories are. So those, and then of course, people like Gandhi, phenomenal what he did. And then coming to the more recent generations, of course, it's reading a lot about Andrew Carnegie, in the US, Henry Ford, a lot of the US robber barons that gave away bulk of their wealth and the work they did. And then, of course, a lot in Indian traditions. For example, the way Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya went about setting up Banaras Hindu University. It's an amazing story that people should read. Like literally going door to door, collecting money to set up a university. It was just a phenomenal journey. Or how, people gave away their ornaments and other things to help raise money for the freedom struggle in India. Or Vinoba Bhave's Buddha movement. What a movement. The amount of land that man raised I don't think the largest philanthropic organization can raise today with all the resources and all the sophisticated MBA planning that we put behind it. So, Baba way. And then, of course, more recent, it's people like Bill Gates and, Chuck Feeney, of course, in the US, extremely inspiring person. Most people haven't even heard of him. Chuck Feeney actually founded the Atlantic Philanthropies and General Atlantic Partners, by the way. And all his wealth from that went into the Atlantic Philanthropies. Until pretty much till the book about him was written, nobody knew where the money was coming from. So he was completely anonymous and he gave away billions way back. And Chuck Feeney doesn't even own a good car or anything like that. Ridiculously simple.
Wow. On that note, Venkat, how do you think about the point you just made about Chuck Feeney versus quote unquote coming out of the closet in the context of living your promise? Clearly, there's a signaling element to doing that to inspire other people. How do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think that is one of the biggest inhibitions for a lot of people doing good in India. And one of my biggest learnings is actually that, while a percentage of GDP numbers are low and all of that stuff, there's a lot of giving in India that happens completely below the radar, right? So you go and you give money to a beggar, it doesn't get counted in that percentage of GDP figures and stuff like that. I think even after factoring that we are low, not to take away from that, and I think the bulk of that blame lies with the upper middle class and the wealthy of India. The poor in India are as generous as the poor anywhere else in the world. And the poor anywhere in the world are far, far, far higher in their generosity than the wealthy. Right? Their giving as a percentage of their income is ridiculously high compared to.
I was just saying, in terms of keeping it private versus being public about it, how do we?
I think we've had that tradition of not wanting to talk about it. The left hand is not supposed to know what the right hand gives. Anybody who talks, a lot of our scriptures talk a lot about that as well. And in fact, if you go back to that first annual report of GiveIndia, where you remember that paragraph I mentioned to you. Hello?
I'm here.
So if you remember that first paragraph you talked about where we wrote about GiveIndia shutting down, above that paragraph was a story. I'll see if I can dig that out and send it to you. Story of which I read in our school textbook when I was a kid, of a rich miser and a cobbler. Do you have time? Should I?
Sure.
Okay. So the miser in a place, a very confused bugger, very uncompassionate, very, so people would go to him in need, he would kick them out and throw them away, unwilling to help, etc., etc. And outside the gate of his mansion was a cobbler. And a Garib cobbler used to be the most generous person ever. And anybody who had any need, he was always giving. What generosity for this guy to give away so much, right? And after several years, the old miser dies. And the entire community is celebrating. Sala, Khadus, Buddha, mar gaya, acha ho gaya, ye ho gaya, wo ho gaya. The only person crying is the cobbler. Everybody is wondering, look at this guy's magnanimity, that even this Khadus Buddha dies, he's magnanimous. You go and catch him and say, don't worry, he's a bad guy, he deserves. And then finally somebody asks him, why are you crying? And he says, all these years, all that I was giving away, the miser was giving me the money. He just didn't want anybody to know. Very powerful story, right? I think there is a lot to be said about that, because there is value in saying that my giving is so selfless that I don't want the credit for it. And I completely relate to people who feel that, right? And personally, always been trying to go away from credit as much as I can, because credit, I think, board positions, credit, a lot of these are currencies in addition to money. Some people, somebody may not give money unless you give them a board position. They do usko board position. Somebody will not give money if you don't give them credit. Give them the credit. Somebody will not do some good work if they don't get recognition. Give them the recognition. Give them the awards. A lot of these things give people energy to continue. So they are a different form of currency. So those of us who don't need it should actually stay away from it, because it helps get more people involved, more passionately, more engaged and all of that kind of stuff. But what I've learned also is that if we don't talk about it, then people don't know about it. And then you lose out on those opportunities to get a lot of other people to join that journey, right? So when I reflect back and ask myself, why am I doing a lot of this? It is because I read about not just Karna and Mahabali in my childhood because they were mythological characters, but also about Gandhi, also about a lot of other people, Andrew Carnegie, about all these people that I read about when I was young that had an influence on me. So if you don't hear from people, then you don't have those models to be inspired by, right? And I say this without any ego. It's not like, those of us who are doing this are like some great people or anything like that. But if it helps somebody, what's the harm? And I think, when I was going through this reflection for myself, at least, in the context of the Giving Pledge when it first started, my first reaction was similar to many other people. Why are they showing off, etc.? And then I thought deeper about it, and I said that, if someday I have it, I will definitely give it. And then I asked, would I talk about it? And I realized one thing, that this feeling that I don't want to get credit, after a point, there is a certain amount of ego even in that. Right? In saying that, look, I'm so selfless that I don't even want that flower. I'm saying, give that selflessness up also.
Very interesting.
Wo bhi chhod do yaar. Because if it is, if people will think, ye kya sala show off aadmi hai, let him think that about me. If it helps 10 other people give, I don't want to be liked also. Wo bhi de denge, na? Let's surrender all of that.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the why, having the clarity around keeping the purpose front and center.
I think we know why we are doing it. If you're doing it because you want people to, clap for you, or you want 100 Facebook likes, then there's a deep problem with that. But the beauty of, I think all the Living My Promise signatories we've had is exactly that. All of them are coming from a very, very simple space. The one thing common across all 54. Everybody feels deeply grateful for what they are. All of them will uniformly tell you, if you go and read their letters and statements, you will find across the one common thing. I was lucky, I am grateful for what I have, and I owe it back to society. I think that speaks of a humility. It's not like I want to do this, I want to eradicate this, I want to solve this. There's no such arrogance in any of their statements. It's all coming from this very simple humility. Yaar, meri lottery lag gayi hai. Other people inki lottery nahi lagi hai. I just owe it back. As simple as that.
Just as we wrap up, the last question, Venkat, actually coming back to the title of this podcast, Play to Potential. And you actually alluded very early in our conversation about the way you thought about yourself. With my background, maybe I underachieved to my potential. That was a statement you made. But just as we wrap up, what are some of your thoughts on people playing to their potential? Given your view on life.
I think it's almost a truism that most of us don't live up to even 2, 3, 4, 5% of our potential, right? Or 1% or whatever it is. And I think it sounds a little bit cliched when you say those things. But the reality is, I think, you ask anybody, and I'm sure everybody has said this to you across all your talks, no matter how successful, you had some really, really successful people, but I'm sure even they have said that we've not achieved even 1, 2 or 5% of our potential. And I think if you ask me, the biggest factors to it is, I would really say that people who've learned to reflect a lot will have achieved a lot more of their potential than many of us. People who've learned to learn about themselves, who learn to observe themselves earlier in life. People who failed early in life will tend to achieve a lot more to their potential than people who don't. So if I look at myself and why I feel I have hugely underachieved to my potential, I would say a variety of things. First is my ridiculously low emotional quotient. And, the inability to understand, not the unwillingness, just the inability to understand why people are the way they are, right, has dramatically affected my ability to get things to happen. Because, then you wind up becoming a lone soldier more often than not. Or you're working with much smaller teams, the ideas are getting carried less further than they could potentially. So that, I think, is the biggest thing. Second is, I have a tendency sometimes to be penny wise and pound foolish. So, I'm a efficiency optimizer. And I often have that left brain tendency to get very anal about improving efficiency, and you tend to lose focus of the big picture, forest for the trees kind of situation. I think both of these have led me to massively underachieving. So I would say that to help people achieve more to their potential, I think people need to get time to reflect a lot more. And we have to make that time. Nobody's going to come and give you a plate of time saying, here is this reflection. We have to make it for ourselves. And if we can take a step back and keep looking, keep doing our own SWOTs again, looking at our own strengths, weaknesses, etc., keep doing your own ikigai again, and keep asking, what am I doing right? What am I not doing right? The earlier you start, and the earlier you can also do a correction journey, right? Because I think one of my biggest problems is I was pretty much mid-30s by the time I realized how important emotional quotient is in life. I had only successes till then, right? And when you start failing and you realize that, emotional quotient plays a big role, and unfortunately you're already too old to change, it's kind of like you're screwed, right? But if we could get people to realize their strengths, weaknesses much earlier in life, I mean, imagine getting a kid to do its own ikigai at the age of 8, 9, 10 and make it a birthday habit for every kid to do once every year, right? Make your own ikigai, go back to it, etc. and help do that. And that's what the old gurukuls used to do, right? And it's not about, being that patriotic Indian about ancient Indian things, but whether it's a gurukul or even in Europe, if you look at how the kings used to educate their kids, right? They would get a really wise guy to come, hire the guy full time for their kid, and the job would be take my kid and travel all of Europe for the next 20 years. The kid will go somewhere to Paris and learn art for 6 months, 20 years, 4 years, 5 years, something like that. But that guru who was assigned to the kid, the advisor or whatever this thing, their main job was to get the kid to keep reflecting, to keep asking, what am I good at, what am I not good at, etc.
Build perspective, huh?
Build that perspective, because if you do that, then you keep going back to what is my potential, where am I, how much am I playing to my potential. And I think if you can keep doing that every year, then chances are you will reinvest in yourself. When I asked myself that question in 1998, I made the decision to go and spend all the money traveling to the US. Right, instead of buying a house. But I haven't done that again. For the last 4 years, I've been wanting to go to China because I've been equally this thing. But for some reason or the other, it's kept getting postponed, and now I don't know when that will happen next. Or I actually, about 4 years back, I wanted to take a break and go and study for a year or two in the US. I've just not been able to do it for a variety of other situations. So I think, if you don't give yourself opportunities to reinvent yourself, to reinvigorate yourself, sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey says, then you'll wind up underplaying people.
On that note, Venkat, a real privilege and an honor to spend time with you. Thank you so much for sharing the time.
Thank you, Deepak. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Likewise. I hope you found the conversation purposeful. Just a few links as we wrap up, in case you want to take baby steps in your journey towards giving. My journey in philanthropy started with my association with Social Venture Partners, which is a group of like-minded people trying to make a difference in the sector. Being a part of a community has made this a fulfilling experience for me, rather than a lonely affair. The chair of the venture is my mentor and my former colleague from Agon's End, Govind Iyer. He also happens to be on the board of GiveIndia. To know more about Social Venture Partners, and if you're interested in joining, do email me and I can connect you to my colleague, depending on where you live, who can give you additional context. Through Social Venture Partners and otherwise, as I mentioned, I work with Antarang Foundation, a non-profit run by Priya Agarwal that helps youth from challenging backgrounds and helps them with the world of employment in an area of their dreams. To know more about Antarang Foundation and their work, you can visit playtopotential.com/pay-it-forward. And to know more about Living My Promise that we heard Venkat speak about, do visit livingmypromise.org. If you want to know more about other leaders who've managed to weave in giving in their lives, do visit the curated playlist section at playtopotential.com and go to the playlist Social Impact. And to know more about the advisory work I do, please visit About the Host section at playtopotential.com. Bye now.